After loss, there is a moment when you realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. Not in dramatic ways, in quiet ones, not your schedule, not your habits, your reactions, your voice, your sense of who you are. You notice it in small ways first. You hesitate before speaking. You second-guess your reactions. You look at yourself doing ordinary things and feel slightly unfamiliar, as if you are watching someone you used to know. This is not confusion. This is the part of grief no one warns you about. Grief does not only take what you loved, it changes the lens through which you recognize yourself. Before, you moved through the world with a certain internal outline. You knew where you stood. You trusted your instincts. You had a sense of continuity. After loss, that outline softens. You may feel less solid, less certain, less anchored. Not broken, just altered. And that alteration can feel unsettling, even frightening, because no one prepares you for the quiet identity shift that grief brings. Most people misunderstand grief at this stage. They think it is only about sadness. But sadness is only the surface. Beneath it, something deeper is happening. When you lose someone or something that mattered deeply, a part of your internal structure loosens. Roles change, meanings change. Even your memories begin to feel different because the person you were when you made them is no longer fully present. You may ask yourself questions you never asked before. Who am I now? What do I carry? What remains true about me? If this sounds familiar, hear this carefully. You are not losing yourself. You are meeting a version of yourself that has been reshaped by love and loss. Grief does not erase identity. It refines it. But refinement feels disorienting while it is happening. There is often a quiet self-criticism that follows. You may think you have become weaker. But what actually changed is your tolerance for what no longer feels true. You may notice that things which once felt easy now require effort. Conversations drain you. Decisions feel heavier. You may compare yourself to who you were before and feel disappointment. This is one of the most painful misunderstandings grief creates. You interpret sensitivity as fragility. You interpret caution as failure. But what has actually happened is that your inner awareness has deepened. Depth always moves more slowly, and it always looks like weakness at first. Grief changes the way you see yourself because it removes illusions that once protected you. Before loss, many people live with an unspoken sense of permanence, not consciously, but quietly. A sense that things will more or less continue. When that illusion breaks, you begin to see life and yourself more clearly. You notice limits. You notice vulnerability. You notice how much you feel. That clarity can feel like exposure. But it is not damage. It is truth arriving without anesthesia. You may also notice that you relate to others differently. You feel less impressed by noise, less patient with trivial cruelty, more affected by small kindnesses. You may feel out of step with people who have not walked through loss. This can create a sense of isolation, not because you are distant, but because you now perceive more. Grief sharpens perception. And sharper perception can make familiar environments feel strangely thin. Some people worry that this change means they will never feel like themselves again. They long for the old version, the lighter version, the unscarred version. This longing is understandable, but it is also incomplete. You are not meant to return to who you were. You are meant to integrate who you have become. Grief does not ask you to abandon joy or strength. It asks you to carry them with greater honesty. There is a quiet dignity in this phase, even if it does not feel that way yet. You are learning how to stand with less illusion and more truth. You are learning how to move without forcing yourself back into old shapes that no longer fit. This takes patience. It takes gentleness, and it takes permission to be unfamiliar to yourself for a while. If you feel smaller, it is not because you have diminished. It is because your inner world has expanded, and expansion can feel like loss of definition before it settles. If you feel slower, it is not because you are failing. It is because your movements now carry more weight and more meaning. Grief has taught you to feel the cost of things. That is not weakness, that is depth. For now, do not rush to define yourself again. Do not demand clarity too soon. Let this quieter version of you breathe. Let it learn its balance. What you are experiencing is not the end of who you are. It is the reshaping of your inner stance. And in time, this stance will carry a strength that is calm, grounded, and real. You have not disappeared. You are still here. You are simply seeing yourself without the old filters. After grief reshapes the way you see yourself, there often comes a second, quieter struggle. It is the tension between who you were expected to be and who you now find yourself becoming. People around you may not notice the shift, but you do. You sense it when expectations feel heavier than they used to, when familiar roles no longer sit comfortably, when you try to step back into old patterns and something inside you gently resists. This resistance is not rebellion, it is honesty. This is where many people start doubting themselves and shouldn't. Grief strips away the ability to perform without cost. Before loss, you may have been able to stretch yourself thin without noticing the damage. You could absorb demands, smooth over conflicts, carry emotional weight that was not yours. After loss, that capacity changes. You may find that you cannot pretend as easily. You cannot overextend without consequence. This can make you feel less capable, but in truth, it means your inner boundaries have become clearer. Many people misread this shift as selfishness or withdrawal. You may even misread it that way yourself. You may think, I used to be stronger than this. I used to give more. But strength that ignores reality is not strength. It is endurance without wisdom. Grief introduces wisdom in a way that feels abrupt. It teaches you what costs too much. And once you know that, you cannot unknow it. This is often when guilt appears. You may feel guilty for needing more rest, for saying no, for stepping back from conversations that drain you, for protecting your emotional space. Grief can make you feel as though you owe the world your former self, as if returning to who you were would somehow make the loss less real. But the opposite is true. Honoring what has changed is part of honoring what mattered. There is also a subtle grief for the self you used to be. This grief is rarely named, but it is real. You may miss your former ease, your spontaneity, your unguarded laughter. This does not mean those qualities are gone forever. It means they now emerge differently, more selectively, more honestly. You are not becoming colder. You are becoming more precise about where you place your warmth. Grief also changes how you measure your own worth. Before, you may have defined yourself by productivity, usefulness, or consistency. After loss, these measures can feel hollow. You may sense that your value no longer comes from what you produce, but from something quieter, from presence, from endurance, from the way you hold pain without letting it harden you. This shift can feel uncomfortable in a world that rewards visible output, but it is a truer measure. In this phase, many people fear they are becoming fragile. They notice tears arrive more easily. Emotions sit closer to the surface. They feel less defended. But fragility is not the right word. Sensitivity increases because your inner life is more awake. Grief has removed some of the emotional insulation you once carried. This makes you more responsive, not more breakable. A finely tuned instrument is not weak because it reacts to small changes. It is precise. You may also notice a growing intolerance for false comfort. Words that once sounded reassuring now feel empty. Quick solutions irritate you. You may crave silence more than explanation. This is not negativity. It is discernment. Grief teaches you the difference between words that fill space and words that carry weight. It teaches you to listen for truth rather than reassurance. At times, you may feel as though you exist between versions of yourself. No longer who you were, not yet settled into who you are becoming. This in-between state can feel lonely, but it is also sacred ground. It is the place where your inner life reorganizes itself around what truly matters. Nothing is wasted here, even if it feels unsteady. It is important to move gently during this time, not to rush healing, not to demand resolution. Identity after loss is not rebuilt through effort. It stabilizes through acceptance. Through allowing yourself to be changed without interpreting that change as failure. You are not behind. You are not malfunctioning. You are adapting to a deeper reality. If you feel quieter, that quiet is not emptiness. It is space. Space where something truer can take root. If you feel more selective, that selectivity is not hardness. It is care. Grief is teaching you how to live without excess, without performance, without pretending you are unaffected by what has touched you deeply. You are not less than you were. You are more real than you have ever been. As this new sense of self settles in, another question often arises quietly in the background. How do I live as this person now? Not the person I used to be, and not the person others expect me to remain, but the one who has been changed and must still move forward. This question is rarely asked out loud, yet it shapes many of your choices. It appears when you hesitate before commitments, when you feel unsure how much of yourself to offer, when you sense a need for a different rhythm, even if you cannot yet name it. Grief changes your sense of time before it changes your plans. And once you see that, your priorities rearrange themselves. You may feel less driven by urgency and more by alignment, less interested in proving yourself and more interested in preserving what is essential. This shift can feel like loss of ambition, but it is not. It is a change in direction. You are no longer running on borrowed momentum. You are learning to move from a place that respects the weight of experience. There is often fear attached to this change. Fear that you will become too cautious. Fear that you will miss opportunities. Fear that you will shrink your life in an attempt to protect it. These fears are understandable, but they assume that expansion only happens through speed and risk. Grief teaches a different form of expansion, one that grows through depth, presence, and discernment. You may do fewer things, but you will do them with greater integrity. At times, you may feel disconnected from joy. Not because joy is gone, but because it no longer arrives the way it used to. Loud joy, careless joy, unexamined joy may feel distant. This can be frightening. But grief does not erase joy. It refines it. Joy becomes quieter, more grounded, more intertwined with gratitude. It may show up as calm rather than excitement, as peace rather than thrill. This is not a lesser joy. It is a steadier one. You may also notice that you relate to time differently. Grief slows perception. Moments stretch. Future plans feel less concrete. This can feel like stagnation, but it is actually awareness. You are no longer rushing past your own life. You are inhabiting it. This presence can feel heavy at first, because you are fully aware of both beauty and loss. Over time, it becomes grounding. One of the most difficult adjustments is accepting that some people will not recognize this new version of you. They may push you to return to familiar patterns. They may interpret your changes as distance or indifference. This can hurt, especially when you already feel tender. But your task is not to be understood by everyone. Your task is to be faithful to the truth of what you are carrying. Those who are meant to walk with you will adjust. Those who cannot may drift, not out of malice, but out of mismatch. In this stage, self-compassion becomes essential. Not indulgence, but respect. Respect for the fact that you have been altered by something meaningful. Respect for the limits that now exist. Respect for the wisdom that grief has carved into you. This respect shows up in small choices. Resting without apology. Speaking honestly about what you can and cannot do. Allowing silence to be enough. You may still wish at times to be untouched by this experience, to go back, to feel the simplicity of before. That wish does not mean you are ungrateful for growth, it means you are human. But over time, you may begin to notice something else. A quiet strength that was not there before. A steadiness in your values. A clarity about what matters and what does not. These are not consolation prizes. They are the fruit of endurance. Grief does not give you a new identity all at once. It reveals it gradually as you learn how to live without the illusions that once held you together. This process is not linear. Some days you will feel grounded. Other days you will feel unsure. Both are part of integration. You are learning how to stand with truth without collapsing under its weight. You do not need to rush this becoming. There is no timeline for settling into a self that has been changed by love and loss. What matters is that you remain gentle with yourself as you learn its contours. You are not rebuilding from ruins. You are reorganizing around what is real. This version of you carries grief, yes, but it also carries depth, discernment, and a quiet resilience that does not need to announce itself. When grief has altered the way you see yourself, and you have begun to live within that change, there is one final misunderstanding that often lingers. The fear that you will always be defined by what you lost, that your identity will forever orbit around absence. This fear can be subtle, but it shapes how you imagine your future. You may worry that every joy will carry a shadow, that every sense of peace will feel provisional. I want to speak to that fear gently and clearly. Grief does not become your identity. It becomes part of your history. A chapter, not the title. What grief changes is not the center of who you are, but the depth from which you now live. You do not move forward by forgetting what happened. You move forward by allowing it to settle into its proper place, integrated rather than dominant. There is a difference between carrying grief and being carried by it. In the early stages, grief carries you. It dictates your energy, your focus, your self-perception. Over time, if you allow space for honesty and patience, the balance shifts. You begin to carry grief instead. It becomes something you can hold without it holding you. This is not because it has disappeared, but because you have grown strong enough to contain it. This is where the quiet strength of the silent lion emerges. Not in force, not in declarations, but in steadiness, in the ability to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, in the capacity to remain open without collapsing. You are not hardened by grief, you are tempered by it. You may notice that your sense of self now has weight. Not heaviness, but substance. You know what you can survive. You know what truly matters. You are less easily shaken by surface chaos because you have already walked through something that redefined your inner ground. This does not make you invulnerable. It makes you rooted. At times, memories will still surface unexpectedly. A smell, a phrase, a place, and you may feel the familiar ache. This does not mean you are regressing. It means love left an imprint. An imprint is not a wound. It is a mark of connection. Over time, these moments become reminders of capacity rather than loss. Capacity to love, capacity to endure, capacity to remember without unraveling. Your self-image may continue to evolve. You may see yourself as more serious, more reflective, more discerning. You may worry that this seriousness means you have lost lightness. But lightness after grief is different. It is not careless. It is intentional. It appears when you feel safe enough to allow it. And when it does, it carries authenticity rather than escape. One of the quiet gifts of grief is that it aligns you with truth. You no longer need to inflate yourself to feel significant. You no longer need constant validation. You know your worth because it has been tested in silence. This does not make you superior to others. It makes you grounded in yourself. As your identity settles, you may find that your faith, in whatever form it takes, has also changed. It may be quieter, less performative, more internal. Faith after grief is often stripped of excess language and reduced to trust, breath by breath. This is not a weakening of faith, it is a deepening. You trust not because you have answers, but because you have survived uncertainty. There will be days when you feel at peace with who you have become, and there will be days when you miss who you were. Both can coexist. Integration does not require erasing longing. It requires holding it without letting it define you. You are allowed to honor the past without living there. What grief ultimately offers is not closure, but clarity. Clarity about your limits, your values, your capacity for love. This clarity reshapes identity in a way that is quieter, truer, and more durable than before. You are not a diminished version of yourself. You are a distilled one. You are still capable of joy, of connection, of purpose. They now arise from a deeper place, a place that has been shaped by loss, yes, but also by resilience and grace. You are not broken. You are formed. Walk in the light, even on the days it feels distant.